Coming up on this episode of Tom Talks Rubbish.
I'm not a negative person. I try to find the silver linings in everything. Um, and for me, I was just finding everything negative, whether it was about wrestling or even just my life in general. Everything, I was finding a problem with everything. When it came to content creation, I was looking at other people and seeing who's getting higher numbers than me, who's getting more opportunity than me. Uh, and you start to resent people, you start to resent your work, you start to resent wrestling.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Tuxrarish, and stand back with another interview. This time, I'm joined by the one named Joey Carney from The Angle with Joey Carney. So, welcome to the show.
What's going on, man? Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to talk with you about all your work and everything in between. But before we do that, my friend, we need to know, where do you first discover wrestling as an overall fan?
So I was 3 years old when I first discovered wrestling, specifically the WWE. My grandfather was a veteran, and there
Mhm.
was not much that he really enjoyed or was able to find a smile in, I guess you could say. So sitting down, watching wrestling was his way of kind of escaping, PTSD or whatever he was going through from being at war. And from such a young age, seeing that really be something that makes him smile kind of stayed with me. And then I started to enjoy that. And now, in my 30s, I'm here.
What era of WWE are we talking about, my friend, when you're 3 years old?
So this was the early 90s. So it had to be the NWO era of WCW, where a lot of the WWE guys were leaving the company or the
Mm.
federation at that time, going to WCW and kind of seeing the back and forth of really the Monday Night Wars right
Mm.
before the Attitude Era, but that first initial like, wow, this guy's there, this guy's over there now, like all of that.
That's really, really cool. Do you remember the specific moment that you were watching with your grandfather and went, yeah, I get wrestling now?
You know what? I don't remember it because there are so many memories. Majority of my memories are from wrestling. So they all kind of just glue together. But I think honestly, watching him mesmerized by Hulk Hogan, because
Mm.
granted, how everybody feels about Hulk Hogan today, he is the all-American, guy. And for him being a veteran, being one for America, it was kind of his guy that this is the
Mm.
guy that we cheer for because he's waving the American flag and I was in a war, so he clicked, I think, most. So seeing Hulk Hogan at that time was where I saw, oh, the emotional side of how these guys and girls in the ring make people outside feel.
You might be too young to uh, answer this question, but do you remember how your grandfather felt, or did he ever talk about how he felt about the Sergeant Slaughter Hulk Hogan rivalry in the 80s and how he felt about war being used in storyline?
I don't know if we ever talked about it. Just because I was so young. I was born in 93, so growing up, I was already way behind me. I don't think he ever discussed it, but I'm sure I would have loved to have that conversation.
No, I understand what you were saying completely there. So when you do discover wrestling, man, is it something that you're like, hook this into my veins every time we go see Granddad, we're gonna go watch this? Or were you watching it away from him? How did your wrestling consumption start?
So it started from there, and then, in the later '90s came the Attitude Era, and seeing The Rock, Stone Cold, Kane, The Undertaker, these really out of what we see in society at that time, these characters come to life.
Mm.
I started watching at home, and then I started asking my mom to take me to buy the VHS tapes, and then playing the video games because at that point I was already becoming, I was somewhere between like the 5 to 7 age range.
Mm.
So video games and action figures and cool stuff, superheroes, were all kind of the thing at the time. But my friends everybody went, they had their favorite uh athletes. Someone loved Derek Jeter, someone loved this guy from the NFL, and I was like, I love Stone Cold.
Yeah, yeah, I get what you mean.
I was the wrestling guy. I was always been known as the wrestling guy in all of my friend groups.
Why do you think, did traditional sports speak to you though, or was it just wrestling that spoke to you?
I played traditional sports all my life. I was in basketball. I was even in wrestling, but basketball, baseball, I played all the sports. I grew up with the same group of guys, and every year, every season, we all played the same sport on the same team. So it's
Mm,
kind of a thing of my childhood. But when I got into wrestling, I think I loved the emotional part because I know we're supposed to be big tough men, but I'm an emotional guy. And I
yeah, so am
love,
I. So am I.
yeah, it's cool to say it today.
Mm,
Uh, I love the emotional side and what it brings out, feeling wise, but I also love the storytelling. And I think the storytelling aspect is what gets me because I'm a really creative person. I've always been,
mm,
whether it be art or writing. Writing is really how I got started in all of this.
mm.
So being in that creative realm, I think the storytelling is what hooked me initially.
What is your favorite overall story in wrestling then?
Mm. There are so many. I get so sidetracked like with questions like that because I get sidetracked with what I actually enjoy and what I know is the overall best storylines of all time. It would easily be Undertaker versus Kane is probably the greatest character storyline of all time.
Mm,
Stone Cold and The Rock could be a great storyline of all time. For me, I think honestly, seeing Stone Cold go after Vince McMahon, and that was really that first big storyline for me where I was like, wow, this is real. Where that authenticity came
yeah.
because now I remember my at that time, my dad, who has always been not in a negative way, but he's always been a blue collar worker. He's always been in the service industry. And for him to get hooked by Stone Cold and Vince McMahon, being a guy that says, "Wow, I want to punch my boss in the face." So seeing it bring other people in my family alive, I think that was my probably one of my favorite storylines of all time.
That's really, really cool. You brought up how writing was your gateway into this space. So how do you get into this content creation space, my friend, and start your great podcast and great YouTube channel?
I appreciate that, by the way. But I have never been someone who's like, I'm going to be a wrestler. I never said that. Although growing up, people always told me you should be a wrestler because I was always F5ing people uh, at parties.
Mm,
I was swanton bombing into the pools. I was doing frog splashes on trampolines, but I was never like that guy. I'm like, I'm going to hurt myself. I'm not doing it. Or I'm going to hurt somebody else. It was just never a thing. And being in that creative realm, always writing, whether it was for school projects that I enjoyed or just on my own, journaling, I guess. I don't even know what it was called. I remember watching wrestling, and then I had to be maybe 8 or 9 years old at this point.
mm,
Uh, Writing on the computer, like everything that I observed, like remembering it and writing it out how I saw it.
mm,
And I initially started writing articles, and I still have these books, like 30, 40 pages from Raw and SmackDown, Heat, Velocity, all these old shows that some people don't even know about. Whatever I saw, I would just write it because I was such like a observant person, but
mm,
I had to just get it out. I wasn't able to hold things and I had to just get it out. So
mm,
writing was really that point where I was able to just spew out everything that I saw.
mm.
And then
So,
getting older, I kind of pulled out of that a little bit, and I was like, maybe I don't know what to do in wrestling because when I was in high school and college, content creation wasn't really a thing yet.
mm,
It's more of like a part of a business, but a small part of companies that people don't really know about.
mm,
And with the social media boom of content creation, I'm like, what could I do to get involved in wrestling without being a wrestler? I don't want to be a commentator. I don't want to be a backstage interviewer. I want to be in control of my own destiny in a sense. Uh, so I started just going back to that thing that I did as a kid, writing, observing, and now talking to a microphone. And I
Yeah.
sat for during the pandemic in 2020, I sat days learning how to do YouTube, learning how to hook up a mic, what mic to buy, what program to use. I learned everything by myself. No one around me knew how to do anything. So I had to be the one to just take the initiative and learn all of it, all of it. Even my logo, all my graphics, I learned how to do it all. It's all
That's
I'm
really
a one
cool.
man team.
You talked about there being a one-man team. Is there some pros and cons to that in the respect of like we've talked about openly in DMs that you are currently, as we record this, on a burnout break in your own words. So is
Yeah.
there some pros and cons to being like the content is solely on you sort of thing?
Yeah.
You can record when you want, but on the flip side, if you don't record, the content doesn't happen. I hope that makes sense. I know what I'm
No,
trying to
of
say.
course. Of course. So over the last year and a half, I would say I got involved with being a part of WWE media, being
Mhm.
invited to go to SummerSlam and Rumble and WrestleMania, and
This is how I
uh,
discovered you, by the way.
really,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I appreciate that. Um, Being invited to these events and learning the processes there kind of opened my eyes to how other people do things because before I
Mm,
didn't know anybody at all in this industry.
mm.
Few people I met here and there on social media, but it's different meeting on social media than meeting in person.
Yeah.
Um, and I will always give credit to my one of my good friends now, Issa, the Demon Diva, NYC Demon Diva. She is the queen of reactions. She's known as the Roman Reigns girl because her thing was all around Roman Reigns, and
Yep.
that's how kind of she found her way. And she was the one who introduced me to this is how you can do WWE, get into WWE media. This is what you get to do when you're there. So she kind of prepped me for all of that. And to see, she works with Lucha Libre online. So to see her process of how she goes about stuff, where not just her, other people in media too, they're able to uh, film an interview and send it off to the editor, and that's it. Me, I have to come up with the questions, do the interview, make sure all the equipment is right. Some people get to bring photographers, videographers. I'm there by myself, and now I have to go back to my hotel and edit all this on my own and post it while some other people have all these people doing it for them. So that is a pro of, or a con of doing it on your own.
Mm,
But the pro is I control everything.
mm.
No one can tell me no. No one can, it's all my creation, my ideas. And I like to go by the idea of, if no one's going to do it better than you,
Mm.
where maybe that is a fault of mine sometimes, because again, like you said, I am on a burnout break right now. I haven't made content for over 2 weeks, which is like this is the first time in like 3-4 years I've done that.
Mm.
And I have felt great, honestly. Like I didn't realize how much I needed it until
Yeah.
I have barely watched wrestling. And that's crazy for me as well. I've kind of watched the highlights, but I've kind of said, you know what? I don't need to. I'm not forced to right now because I felt for a while it was forced, if
Mm.
that makes sense.
Definitely. Is the not watching wrestling while you're on a burnout break from content creation also in the sense of like your reviewing brain will automatically kick in, if that makes sense, if you do
Yeah.
watch wrestling?
Yeah. And to be honest, over the last 2 weeks, I didn't even think of content ideas. I didn't even I don't know how I did it, and that's been the hardest thing for me to turn that off and just enjoy the things around me
Mm.
and not pay attention to the creative side of me. I think honestly I was extremely burnt out.
When did, because when, for people that may not know, you talked about being extremely burned out there. When did you start to feel that? And when was finally, in the words of a hit song, enough is enough sort of thing, that you were like, I need a break?
Uh Honestly, I realized it after SummerSlam,
Mm-hmm.
and I kept pushing and pushing, and I'm not a negative person. I try to find the silver linings in everything. Um, and for me, I was just finding everything negative, whether it was about wrestling or even just my life in general. Everything, I was finding a problem with everything. When it came to content creation, I was looking at other people and seeing who's getting higher numbers than me, who's getting more opportunity than me. Uh, and you start to resent people, you start to resent your work, you start to resent wrestling. You know,
Mm,
I wasn't, and I'll be completely honest with you. I wasn't hearing back from people who I was emailing, whether it be wrestling companies or people for interviews. People
mm,
were just ghosting me, and it started making me resent the thing I love most.
mm.
And you can kind of see through the content over the last couple months where instead of being positive, I was kind of coming off angry and negative and
Mm.
finding the bad things that were happening in wrestling. And that's not my character at all. So I was kind of like, you know what? Before I hate wrestling, it's not even about the content creation or my show. Like, if I was, and this might sound really bad, but I can be done with my show tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I love professional wrestling as a viewer, as a
Mm,
fan. That's my first priority. Um, and I was starting to hate it,
mm,
and I needed to just cut everything off and kind of go home.
mm. I understand what you're saying completely there. So I appreciate you doing this while you're on a burnout break. I'm not gonna lie.
Exactly. Yes. And what's funny is that while we're filming this, I know this is going to be posted in a different date, but I actually sat down today and earlier this morning, actually, and had some ideas, and I started filming some stuff,
Mm,
and I kind of got the butterflies back from when I initially started.
mm.
And I kind of got the what's it called? Like that, the confidence.
Excitement, for lack of a better word.
There is excitement, but the lack of confidence where I'm like, I don't like that on camera at all. I don't like how I look in that I don't like how I sound. The things that were mattering that mattered to me before, instead of just turning on the camera and coming up with some crap, now I was really putting effort back into it.
Mm.
I'm a perfectionist. I am to a fault. I can admit it. I'm very self-aware.
I think
But
we all are that do things like this.
yeah, you
Yeah.
have to be, because if you're doing it on your own, you gotta have to be, the end all be all. Um, but I started coming up with ideas and started throwing some stuff around. So I'm gonna be back very soon doing my stuff. I'm excited about it. Um, I don't know if you saw from my pictures, but over this break, I shaved my head. I
Mm.
was like a full cleanse. Like, I've never been one of those spiritual people, but I was like, I need to just release all of this stuff. And I shaved my head. And honestly, it was the greatest feeling. I felt like I was in a straight edge society, like in 2010 when they were doing that, because it was the most like rejuvenating feeling. And yeah, just been focusing on myself. Took a little trip, went
Mm.
to Orlando, and
Ooh,
yeah, now I'm here with you.
that's really, really cool. And like I said, I appreciate you doing this, man.
Of
So
course.
you talked about there as well. Oh, your show could go away tomorrow, and you'd always have a love of pro wrestling. So
Yeah.
what? So how do you keep that when you're making content? How do you keep that love alive, sort of thing?
Um, I think I always come back to the idea of how I felt about it as a kid. And I
Mm,
think that's the most important thing as adults. Whoever's listening to this, whether you're 40, you're 14, or you're 10, whatever, find those things in your life that make you feel like a kid. Find those things that make you feel that real excitement and love and passion that you felt as your younger self, you
mm,
know? And I think that's really, really important. And for me, it's wrestling. I'm 31 years old, but I remember the feeling I felt from watching Eddie Guerrero win the WWE Championship in 2004.
Mm.
You know, I remember that feeling of John Cena becoming the WWE Champion. I remember that feeling of, uh, you know, regardless of whatever the hell it is, for me, the feeling comes first. And that is what kind of keeps that love and fire today for me in wrestling.
Which you explain, which let me start that one again. I spoke too fast. Which explains in your own words why you had to take a break because, like you
Yeah.
said, wrestling will always be your first love. So
Yeah.
I really respect that. To be honest, if we go back to the origins of your channel, though, Joey, was it sort of a? You said you started it during the pandemic, correct? Was
Yeah.
it sort of a um, pandemic project and like, okay, this is something to keep me occupied during the pandemic. When everything opens up again, we'll see where we are, sort of thing.
Um, Not really, because I did start doing it in 2019. So I did technically start it before the pandemic. But during the pandemic is when I really put effort, or the correct amount of
Mm.
effort, because I had nothing else going on. You know, I was stuck
Yeah.
home. So without the pandemic, I don't know if I would have a show today.
Mm. You brought up there not knowing if you'd had a show today. So if the pandemic never happened, do you think you would still be doing it now?
Um, Probably not, because before my show initially started as me giving my input in a microphone of what I thought about whatever was going on in wrestling. And during the pandemic, I kind of saw it as an opportunity to highlight wrestlers who
Mm.
aren't able to work and be on TV, and do their thing and give them an opportunity, even though I didn't really have a platform at the time, just an opportunity to speak to a fan
Mm.
that, you know, regardless of what it is, the initial thought was I can help these guys and girls.
Mm. How did you think you, in your own words, you said you didn't have much of a platform. So how did you think you could help in some ways? I hope that doesn't come across offensive, but I know what I mean.
No,
I
not
know
at
what I'm
all.
trying to say.
I know that first off, because of my love for it, I know that I can ask the right questions and have a conversation
Mm.
where um these people who come on my show don't feel like they're being interviewed. They don't
Mm.
feel like they're given, they have to say yes, no, because there are a lot of shows or podcasts out there who are only worried about having the
Clicks.
most interviews. Who has the most interviews? Who has the most they gotta ask questions that are gonna be controversial because that's how they thrive on social media. Like, I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to be like your typical journalist. I wanted to be, honestly, I wanted to be like a Joe Rogan in the space. I
Mm.
wanted to be able to have a conversation, a deep conversation, and maybe touch on things that normal podcasters weren't touching on. You
Mm.
know, I've had more than a handful of people cry on my show. And
That was
that's
going to be
not,
my follow-up question, actually.
I'm not happy about that, but it just shows that, one, I make people feel comfortable to be vulnerable, but two, I care enough to ask things that actually matter.
Mm.
I don't care about what your favorite match of all time was in your career. I want to know what you felt going into that match. I want to know the things that maybe you've been skeptical to share before.
Mm.
Because I love this so much, I want to make people feel essentially kind of like the love. It may sound cheesy, but I want
Mm.
to bring out that love in other people.
That's really, really cool. So you talked about there, and you mentioned yourself that others have cried on your show. If we go back to the first moment that somebody cried, how did you sort of navigate that as an interviewer? Because that can be something that's very difficult as an interviewer.
So as you know, yourself doing interviews,
Mm.
we all do our research beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Sometimes we watch interviews of that person on other people's show to kind of see how they act, and also what questions have already been asked.
Mm.
It's a big thing for me. I try to ask questions that have not been asked yet.
Mm.
Um, and for example, I'll give you one of the first ones that did it. Well, there's two, and they were actually in a 2 days time frame. First one was Eric Bischoff,
Mm.
and he kind of I didn't get credit for it because God forbid these news uh, whatever give credit to smaller creators.
Mm.
But essentially, during my conversation with Eric Bischoff, and this was maybe 2021 or 2022, he essentially said that he's done, that he will not sign a full-time contract anywhere else. Like he's kind of, accepted the fact that his time has passed.
Mm.
And it was like an emotional moment because he even said, "This is the first time I'm talking about this." And he said that on my show.
Yeah.
And 2 days later, I interviewed DDP, and we were talking about his his documentary movie kind of thing he had on Amazon Prime, and I had written a review on it,
Mm.
and I read him the review, and he just fell apart.
Mm.
And I don't think that, again, a journalist or a podcaster hadn't done that for him,
Yeah.
kind of validating the thing he's striving to do.
Mm.
So it was they're just real moments. I think that's the best way to describe it. They're real, genuine moments. And I kind of get emotional in those moments too. So, just kind of just do it when it happens.
What would be you talk about just do it there. What would be your advice to anyone that wants to start an interviewing podcast now? Because like we said, there is a lot of them out there.
I would say find the thing that you're most passionate about in wrestling.
Mm.
What about it is your favorite thing? Do you love the moves? Do you love the storytelling aspect? Do you love the entrance themes? Because guess what? You could start a podcast right now where you just talk about wrestlers' entrance themes. I haven't seen that yet, but I'm just throwing it out there. Find the thing that makes you stand out and that could be your niche. And before anything, don't get ahead of yourself because a lot of us do.
Mm.
And find the thing that you really do love the most and do your research. Find before you just go film something, find out, what works and what doesn't work.
Mm. How did you do that before your first interview? How did you figure out what your format was and things like that?
Honestly, I learned on the fly because my first interview uh, was actually in person and it was with Melina, if you could believe
Mm-hmm.
that or not. I had been invited to a wrestling event in New York,
Mm.
independent show, and the booker had asked me if I wanted to do interviews, and I said sure. I had never done one before, but I kind of you know, just come up with some things. And if you go watch that on my channel, it's the worst interview ever, but
I think
it's
my first one would beat that, man. Honestly.
I had this camera that I didn't have like great audio. So like I was in an auditorium full of people. It's loud. You can't even hear us talking. Every word out of my mouth, I was saying, like,
Mm.
and I still do that here and there, but
Mm.
it was just, you could tell it was my first time doing an interview and I learned on the fly. And then after that, I started researching on YouTube, watching the people I wanted to be like, who I was inspired by, the Joe Rogans. Uh, Even today, I know it's kind of funny to say, but if you look at the biggest podcast today, you have Call Her Daddy with Alex Cooper.
Mm.
She's more casual and she's kind of direct in a sense.
Yeah.
There's a reason why she's one of the biggest podcasts in the world. So look to those people and see what you can take to still be your authentic self, but what you can use as a tool.
Mm. What is one thing that you take from that first interview then? You talk about using it as a tool. What is one thing that you take from that first interview that you're like, mm, I'll keep this, but I'm discarding this?
Uh, how authentic I was because I was so nervous and it was my first time doing it. And because I was so genuine, Melina loved that.
Mm.
She was absolutely floored. Like she actually got a little emotional because I asked her a question. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I had asked her uh something about one of her favorite matches with Mickey James.
Mm.
And I guess the way I worded it, I just came off very genuine and appreciative of her work.
Mm.
And that's like when you show how appreciative you are to them,
Mm.
they don't feel like a wrestler. They feel like a human being.
Mm.
And I think that was the biggest takeaway. I was like, wow, like she actually enjoyed that.
Yeah,
I didn't think she was going to.
I understand what you're saying completely there. What about the biggest thing that you're like, no, not doing that ever again?
uh while being very nervous and while being very confident in my ability to know things about her, um, I just looked like a dork. I don't
Mm.
know. I think I looked overly confident and it didn't look right. It looked like I don't know. I didn't like the way that I presented myself physically,
Mm.
where I wasn't looking at the camera. I was kind of turned the whole time and holding the microphone. And she would go to say something, and I would take it to say something, not knowing the timing of her answer.
Yeah.
So it just maybe because I was so nervous, I went too quickly.
Mm. How did you, when the pandemic hit, how did you transition then to in virtual interviews? Because like that's a skill in itself. I'm not gonna lie. Knowing like verbal cues and stuff when you talk when you're not watching someone's body language. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. It was difficult to learn that. Um, it was kind of one of those things you have to learn on the fly. You can kind of see in my earlier interviews that there's sometimes an awkward pause
Mm.
in between answers because you don't know who's going to speak. And you know, that's sometimes okay. Sometimes you know it gets a little too awkward, but majority of the time, because you're not face to face, it's a little harder. And I'll give credit to Chris Van Vliet for that because when I first started interviews, I had DM'd him. He didn't know who I was. I barely knew who he was. I had seen his interviews. And, you know, for the first time going to DM somebody who has a blue check mark and you know is, you know, famous, you don't know if they're going to answer. And I asked him directly, you know, I'm a huge fan of your work. What platform would you suggest to use and how to go about it? And he told me flat out, uh, I think he was using it wasn't Zoom, it was the other one. I forgot the other one. Um
StreamYard?
StreamYard, yes. And he was just so like genuine and open with me as if we were friends. And I was like, wow, like
Mm.
incredible, incredible human being that guy is. I give him all the credit in the world.
I've had him on my show. He is as fun as advertised. Do you know what I mean?
He's just everyone's friend. That's how the best way to put it. He like if he doesn't like you, you have to just be the biggest jerk in
Mm.
the world because he's just a genuine guy. I've met him. I've had him on my show as well, but I've also met him in line for interviews at these WWE events, and
Mm.
he doesn't have that ego where he's because who he is and his numbers. He's better than everybody else. He acts as everyone's equal. He's always giving compliments. He remembers who you are. He's one of one, that guy. So I'll always praise him. But
That's
he was the one that really kind of showed me, well, told me this is the best way to go about it, and you know, and how to really do that.
We've talked about some people that you look up to and some people that have helped you, but who are some up and coming people that you're like 2025 could be their year?
There are so many people. That's one thing. I don't know if that's a normal thing for people like us and what we do in our industry. I don't know if you do it. Do you look for people like maybe not necessarily your competitor? Because I don't really look at other people in the industry as my competitor. I look at, you know, who's everyone does their own thing and there's an audience for everybody.
I personally believe there's enough room at the table. We all can eat. We all have our own
Yeah.
style. That's my
Yeah,
personal opinion.
1000%. You know, there are so many people that I watch today, like I mentioned, Chris Van Vliet, Issa, the Demon Diva. Everyone has their own personality, and that kind of correlates with how they do their
Mm,
show or their content.
mm,
So, you know, Issa is very direct and she will say exactly what she's thinking. There are
mm.
people who love that. I personally love that. That's why I love
Yeah,
her so much.
so do I.
There are people like Chris Van Vliet who are more laid back and, you know, more come off more professional than other
Mm,
people. You know, there's an audience for that as well, clearly.
mm,
Uh, I don't look at them as competitors. Everyone's doing their own thing. But what I will tell you, there are people who I see in this industry who are really uh, moving up and doing stuff. One, I will say, I don't know if you know Jonah. Uh, Jonah is probably my favorite one to watch. He doesn't get any credit. I don't know why. He's got great numbers. He gets great interviews. You know,
Wrestling rewind recap live, yeah?
yes,
Yeah,
yes. He's
yeah,
always
I
got
love
a
Jonah.
guy
He's been on the show
freaking love
loads of
gimmick.
times.
Awesome. Love it. Sometimes I think to myself, how the hell did he get that guy or girl?
Oh
I
yeah,
don't.
so do I.
He gets so many great interviews. He does a great job. He's consistent. I've seen the growth on his platforms on either YouTube or Instagram. Uh, but I don't see him getting the spotlight he deserves. He should be at WWE events
Mm,
interviewing these talent. He should be at AEW events interviewing talent. He should be interviewing TNA talent. And I don't know what the disconnect is, but he's definitely one to watch. And he's a great guy. Put it that way.
I would fully agree with that. Jonah's good
Yeah,
people. He's really good people.
good people.
Before we do my traditional wrap-up questions, this is a bit of a self-indulgent question. We've been talking for about half an hour, about an hour now. So where can I
I can go
improve?
2 days. So
Ah,
how long as you want to go, I can speak for 2 days straight, whatever you need.
fair enough. But I'm curious to know if where can I improve, Joey? What did you enjoy about this conversation? Everything in between.
Honestly, you come off very genuine. You're authentic, uh, and you're just yourself. And that's the best thing I could tell you.
Mm,
Uh, you ask genuine questions and you give me the room to speak.
mm,
You know, I've had interviews before where some people will say, I'll ask a genuine question and I'll get a yes or no.
mm,
And now I'm stuck having to fill that void of time.
mm,
There's other people like a DDP who you'll ask a question and he goes 40 minutes with only one answer.
mm.
So
Yeah, yeah.
there's a variety of different people. And I think that and I've seen the guests you've had on your show, and I've seen uh the reasons. I've kind of come to the conclusion as why you have these people on your show, because you're trying to highlight them and show how everyone's different
Mm.
and really just putting people on a pedestal. And I think that's such a good thing in our industry because there's so much toxicity and
Oh yeah.
negativity. Believe me, I'm on a break because of it.
Yeah.
You know, so keep doing what you're doing, and you know you're very uh you're to the point, and you DM me to do an interview. You asked me a couple times, and I apologize that I didn't get back to you. Um, but you're consistent.
Dude, I'm a small fry. Like,
You're on top of your game. That's how you need to be.
I really appreciate that, man. I'll ask you again off camera, just in case that was a camera answer, if you know what I mean.
You're good. You're good, man.
I really appreciate that. So, one thing we did skip over is before your break, where was your wrestling fandom? What was the show that you were like, okay, I'm going to check this out every week if I can, even if I have to stream it afterwards or things like that?
NXT
Okay.
off the bat. NXT. I
What
love that
was,
show. My favorite. It's my favorite wrestling show out of every wrestling show. Uh, it's just exciting.
as an old school fan, what have been some moments that you're like, okay, Shawn Michaels is recreating this from either his career or Legend's career? in the past.
You could just see sometimes they will use a finish that we've seen in the past,
Mm,
specifically from Shawn Michaels match. Uh, whether it's one example, let's see. By the way, I love what they're doing with Ethan Page.
mm,
The way Ethan Page won the NXT Championship was so creative
mm.
in that fatal four way. I will never stop talking about that finish. That's a finish we haven't seen. I don't even know if we've ever seen
I
that
don't
finish.
think I've seen it before. Like someone else gets hit and pinned onto someone else. I don't think I've seen
Actually,
that.
I take that back. That finish did happen. I believe it happened at, I don't remember the pay-per-view or PLE name. It might have been either a Backlash or remember they had for a little while the Fatal Four-Way pay-per-view.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There was a WWE Championship match. It was John Cena was a champion. It was John Cena versus Shawn Michaels versus Randy Orton versus Edge.
Oh,
So what?
Backlash 2007.
Yes, 2007 or 2008, I don't know, one of those years where
2007 because it was the weekend after Shawn Michaels and John Cena had that that hour long match in London.
yes,
Yeah. So yeah, it
yeah.
was 2007. Only reason I know that is because I was in the audience for that match.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Edge hit a spear on excuse me. Edge hit a spear on Orton, and then Edge hit a spear on Orton. Cena hit an attitude adjustment on Edge, and then Shawn Michaels super kicked Cena. He fell on Edge and retained the title.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Now you said
So
that. Yeah.
that was the same finish as what they did with Ethan Page. But again, 2007, how long ago was that? And that's
Mm,
the first time we've seen that, reappearance essentially.
yeah. I think I fully agree with you. I think that's
And it
really
was an
cool.
HBK match.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think HBK, no, I'm not calling him HBK. That sounds really marky. Shawn Michaels knows that the NXT kids are Shawn Michaels fans, so they're
Of
gonna,
course.
you know what
Easy.
I mean? So, oh, definitely. But do you see my point of like
Yeah.
they know that he knows they're Shawn Michaels fans,
Yep.
so they're
And to
gonna
be
be
given
like,
the opportunity to even like be told by HBK, go do this thing that I've done before, they probably
"Mm,
love it.
oh God, yeah, my friend." As we look at wrapping this up, because I do want to be respectful of your time, like I said,
No
um,
worries.
I have two questions for you before we do my wrap up questions of generic questions and
Yeah.
the content you want to be remembered for. But first of all, do you view your career as a success? And and if you did step away after your break and said like, okay, that's it, I'm done, what would you have viewed it as a success? And what would you want your legacy in this space to be?
I've never been asked that question. And I commend you for that.
Mhm.
Because it's something that I think about all the time. And I'm not even at a point where I could say I have a legacy or am I a success or not. From starting this show 4 years ago, essentially,
Mhm.
now being invited to interview WWE talent at WrestleMania, that to me was a dream. This
Mhm.
WrestleMania 40 was my first ever WrestleMania. And I got to sit in a press box with people I've looked up to watching their content and make my own content. So to me, as a fan first, like I told you, that to me is a success. Do I look at myself as a success? No, because I'm still evolving and I'm still
Mhm.
doing what I need to do to get better. I won't say that I'm a success, but I will say that uh, I am making progress.
Mhm.
Because
Sorry,
yeah,
dude.
no, you're good.
I was about to say, is the progress you've made enough for you to be like, look, if something happened tomorrow and I couldn't upload, I'd be happy with what I've achieved.
1000%. From sitting in my room trying to come up with topics on a $20 Amazon microphone to being invited by WWE to WrestleMania, that essentially that roadmap in such a short period of time, because I know people who've been doing this for 10 plus years.
Mm,
I've done it 4,
mm,
and I'm at the biggest show in all of wrestling, invited to be there.
mm.
So that to me, I would say, yeah, yeah.
What do you think your legacy is in this space if you stepped away and when you step away?
Uh, I don't care about if people like me or don't like me in that sense. I want, I would want my legacy to be that when you watch my content, when you watch my interviews, when you indulge yourself in anything that I've ever done,
Mm,
do you feel the love that I feel when making it? Because my whole goal has been to bring out that side of people that they have to remember way back when. Like I told you, make
mm,
yourself feel like a kid. Like, oh wow, like I've gotten so many compliments on some videos that I've done where people are essentially like, wow, I never thought about that. And they get excited
mm,
again, and it makes them, it rejuvenates their love for wrestling.
mm.
So if I can be remembered for anything, it's the guy that made you realize just how much you love it.
I think that's a beautiful full circle moment because we talked about at the beginning of this how you stepped away for a time because you were starting to not love wrestling anymore. And now
Yeah.
we're ending on talking about how you want to help people regain their love of wrestling, which is a beautiful way to end this, if I'm honest, Joe. But before we do, we're going to do a classic segment on this show, which is called Generic Wrestling Questions. Those of you that have seen my interviews before, when I've
Yes.
asked Joey his favorite
Mhm.
match, favorite pay-per-view card, such as Double or Nothing 2019, for example, his favorite wrestler's entrance theme, tag team, and favorite wrestler. Basically, the questions I assume Joey might be asked on social media or in podcast comments or at events. So now he'll have a place to be like, guys, I have answered this. Please go watch this. So, what's your favorite match of all time?
Favorite match of all time. There's so many of them. I would have to say the Raw after WrestleMania 23, John Cena versus Shawn Michaels.
Why does that one speak to you as a fan?
Just it was one of those matches where I generally thought Shawn Michaels may win,
Mm.
and he did. But just the the time that went into that match, the effort that went into that match, it really did feel like time stopped.
Mm.
Coming off their main event WrestleMania match, that was just like, we get this again for an hour or whatever it was. Crazy.
Mm. I think what's really cool about that match before we continue as well, really cool about that Raw, is they had Edge in his gear, like doing a self tape for a match that just never happened. So that was what made Raw really fluid back then, if you know what I mean. And I
And
think
what's
that was
funny
something.
about that match, what's funny about that match is I actually had interviewed a few months ago Jonathan Coachman, and he had discussed to me, or he had told me that he was there for that match, and
Mm,
that the night before after WrestleMania, John Cena closed down the bar
yeah,
and tell John Cena that you're wrestling HBK tomorrow for an hour, and Cena just left the bar. He just
he
went
just
to bed.
pieced out, didn't he?
Yep. Yep. And he reeked of alcohol that whole match.
He's like, because I've seen that clip on your show actually, and Coachman's words were, when he got to the back, you could
Yep.
smell the alcohol coming out of his pores, if memory serves correctly.
Yep.
That's really, really cool, Joe. What about your favorite overall pay-per-view card?
SummerSlam 2002.
Why does that one speak to you as a fan?
If you look at the superstars that were on that card, everyone's a Hall of Famer.
Hmm.
Not realistically, but like, or not, they're not actually in the Hall of Fame, all of them, but all of
Hmm.
them they're Hall of Fame worthy superstars. Every match on that card was great,
Hmm.
top to bottom. The return of Shawn Michaels, the Brock Lesnar becoming WWE champion, uh, the card opening with Kurt Angle versus Rey Mysterio and Rey Mysterio's first WWE pay-per-view match.
Hmm.
Eddie Guerrero, I mean Undertaker, everybody was on that card.
That's really, really cool. What about your favorite wrestler's entrance theme?
My Time Is Now by John Cena.
Why does that one speak to you as a fan, my friend?
I don't know. I think that when it was debuted, I was funny enough. uh, at my bar mitzvah when I was 13 years old,
Hmm.
um, I came out to the party when they introduced me to that song.
Ah, so
I
is it
was very,
sort of like a core memory thing?
yes, I was very much a chain gang soldier. I loved everything about John Cena. And that song was kind of like, your time is up, my time is now. Like
Mm.
it was empowerment. It was like, yeah, my time is now. And I always lived by that. And I always loved that theme song.
That's really, really cool. What about your favorite tag team?
My favorite tag team. This might be out of left field, but I loved Los Guerreros,
Mm.
Eddie and Chavo Guerrero. I loved everything about those guys, the lying, the cheating, the stealing. When Chavo went down with injury, Eddie brought in Tajiri and they became champions. Like there was so much to love about Los Guerreros. They didn't last that long, but there were so many other teams too. I loved the world's greatest tag team, Team Angle, Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin. Another one.
I think if Eddie didn't pass away, we would have got one more run of Los Guerreros. I think so,
Oh, 1000%.
before he
1000%.
retired.
Yep.
Which I always get. Obviously, it's sad he passed away just in general, but I always get sad when I think we missed out on Eddie HBK, if rumors are to be believed, at that year's Mania. We missed out on so many matches with props that were coming up now, if you know what I mean.
Eddie Guerrero was my favorite wrestler of all time.
Speaking of, thank you for that segue, Joey. And finally, as we wrap this up, the biggest generic question, in my opinion: who is your favorite overall wrestler?
Favorite overall wrestler, I will say is John Cena. My favorite storyteller wrestler, Eddie Guerrero.
Why?
I don't know if there's a difference, but
I know what you mean. Let's do this one at a time then. Why does Eddie Guerrero speak to you?
uh, because he was so open about his struggles and it was brought into his character,
Mm,
and he essentially made a successful career off all the bad things that happened to him. He was able to turn it around, you know?
mm,
I think, the Latino heat and the lying, the cheating, the steal, everything that he was about, that the character was about, was authentic.
mm.
And he was able to tell stories and pull emotion out of people, but also he was always the underdog. So it was someone you were always cheering for. But then he would do these things in the match where he would, hit the chair and then throw it to somebody and play dead essentially. And it was entertaining. It was fun. It was vulnerable. It was all the things that I love about pro wrestling.
And then why does John Cena speak to you as a fan, my friend?
John Cena to me is how people look up to Superman or Batman. He was my superhero.
Mm,
A different view than Eddie Guerrero. I didn't look at Eddie Guerrero as a superhero. I looked at him as a character. He was my favorite. He was my favorite, like, character to watch. But Cena was the end all be all.
mm. That's really, really cool. As we wrap this up, Joey, obviously I want to say thank you for a great conversation. But the question I end this show on is I believe as YouTubers, podcasters, even just people with social media, we're all sort of gonna live forever in a very, very strange way if you think about the word. So what is one piece of content you're like, I would like to be remembered for that? And then what is one that you're like, yuck, please forget about that?
So I'll start with the one that I would want people to not remember. I did an interview with Moose from TNA that was just a mess.
Mm. What was so bad about it?
Could not get an answer out of that guy for my life. He just didn't want to be there. He just was it was not, I guess maybe he was having a bad day, I don't know, but
Mm,
every answer was like, yeah, nah, uh-huh, yeah. I was like, all right, why are we doing this?
mm. Yeah. Then what about the one you want to be remembered for?
My interview with RVD.
Why does
That
that
was
one?
that was my first that was the first time that I interviewed somebody where family members knew who that was.
Mm.
I remember my dad saying, I don't know if I can curse on your show.
Yeah, go on.
Uh, but he said, "Oh shit, RVD?"
Mm.
I said, "Yeah." And I saw the look in his eye as if I'm legit now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was my first like, oh wow, Joey's actually this is a thing. He's doing this thing. Like he's actually interviewing people like he knows. He's not a big wrestling fan. And in that interview, it was really where I personally think, not that, again, not to give credit to myself, but that was one of the first interviews that Rob Van Dam really talked about being in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And a few years later, he's in the Hall of Fame.
Mm. That's really, really cool, my friend. Obviously, I want to say thank you to Joey for a great conversation as we wrap this up. But please promote yourself. Where can the good people find you, your work, etc.?
Of course. Well, thank you for being consistent and following me around as I, finally got back to you and having me on your show and being so open and genuine. I really do appreciate that. Everybody can follow me on every social media platform there is, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, whatever. They're all at The Angle Joey. I would say I post there every day, but I haven't in 2.5 weeks, but I will be doing that very soon. You can look on my YouTube channel. I think it's at The Angle Podcast there. Content, topical content, interviews, all great things about wrestling there. And then I make daily content on TikTok and Instagram, whether it's hot takes or funny things or whatever comes to mind that's relevant in wrestling, you could find there.
It's well worth doing, guys. One of the hardest working people in this space, but one of the nicest as well. So if you guys like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter or at Tom Talks Rubbish, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye now.
Thanks for watching this Tom Talks Rubbish conversation. Before you go, please make sure you leave a like on the video, share it around, and subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish on YouTube, as well as follow Tom Talks Rubbish on Twitter/X.